All Souls Night, 1991. An open casket wake in an isolated village where the dead man decided that taking his secret to the grave simply wasn't enough.
They say the dead don't speak. But I was there when Mr. Arlindo's body opened its mouth in the middle of the night. What he confessed chilled the blood of everyone present and changed the fate of that town forever. I had been working as a gravedigger and caretaker at the St. Anthony Cemetery since the mid-'80s. It was a lonely job, but I enjoyed the silence of the headstones under the moonlight of Minas Gerais. In the autumn of 1991, the village was shaken by the sudden death of Mr. Arlindo, the wealthiest and most influential man in the region, owner of almost all the productive land. The wake was set up in the central chapel, an old wooden building that groaned with the cold wind blowing down from the mountains. The smell inside was a suffocating mix of lily flowers, beeswax candles, and that characteristic metallic odor that precedes decomposition. As was the tradition at the time, the casket remained open, surrounded by 4 solid silver candelabras that cast dancing, deformed shadows on the peeling walls. I was sitting on a bench in the back, just observing the cynical mourning of the heirs, when I noticed the temperature in the chapel drop abruptly. It wasn't just the chill of the Brazilian night. It was a frost that seemed to come from inside the casket itself, an absence of heat that made everyone's breath form small clouds of vapor in the heavy air. The candle flames began to bend away from the body, as if being blown by an invisible mouth, and a low hum, like a distant swarm of bees, began to vibrate in the wooden floorboards under my feet. Would you have the courage to stay alone in a room with a body that seems to be trying to move? Comment now. Around 3 in the morning, the dead hour, most of the curious onlookers had already left, and only the closest family members remained in a restless sleep on the front benches. That was when the first snap happened. A dry sound of cartilage tearing, coming from inside the luxury casket's satin lining. I stood up, thinking it was just the body settling, a natural phenomenon I had seen before, but what happened next defied all logic and sanity. Mr. Arlindo's right hand, which had been crossed over his chest, slid to the side and gripped the wooden edge with a force that turned his knuckles white. His eyes, which had been carefully closed and glued by the funeral home, snapped open with a wet click, revealing dilated pupils that didn't reflect the candlelight but seemed to absorb it. A sound of air escaping from collapsed lungs began to form words, a voice that was no longer his, but a choir of overlapping whispers that seemed to come from deep underground. His jaw dislocated with a cracking sound, and the first sentence came out like a somber lament that made the chapel's windows vibrate. He was not at peace. He was being used as a channel for a confession that the earth refused to swallow without first being purified by scandal. The corpse began to list names. Names of illustrious people from that village who were sitting right there, feigning grief. He spoke of a blood pact signed in 1964, a ritual performed in the abandoned mines to ensure the prosperity of the harvests at the cost of innocent lives. Each word was accompanied by a flow of a dark, oily liquid that leaked from the corners of his mouth, staining the white satin and exhaling a smell of burnt flesh and sulfur that clung to the clothes of anyone who came near. I saw the panic in the eyes of the heirs, who tried to force the casket shut, but Mr. Arlindo's dead hand was like a steel press, preventing any movement. The voice said that the bodies of the children who disappeared in the past were not in the woods, but buried under the pillars of that very parish where we stood. The atmosphere became electric, the air charged with a static electricity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up and small sparks of blue light jump from the silver candelabras. It was a malevolent energy, a spiritual pressure that seemed to want to crush the lungs of anyone who tried to interrupt that profane tale coming from beyond the grave. The dead man's face began to contort into a mask of agony, the facial muscles moving under the cold skin as if something alive were crawling underneath, trying to escape that carcass. The chapel lights went out all at once, leaving us only with the flickering glow of the candles that refused to go out despite the wind now howling inside the building. In the darkness, the dead man's voice grew louder, laughing with a demonic scorn as he revealed where the blood gold was hidden. I saw gray figures materializing in the corners of the room, shadows that had no owners and seemed to feed on the dread emanating from the living. The casket began to levitate a few inches off the pedestal, rocking violently as the creature inhabiting Mr. Arlindo's body screamed that the debt would never be paid, that the next harvest would belong to the dead. In an act of desperation, the village priest, who watched everything paralyzed, tried to throw holy water on the body, but the liquid evaporated before even touching the dead man's skin, creating a black smoke that blinded everyone for a few seconds. I felt an invisible hand tighten around my throat, a freezing pressure that forced me to my knees while the sound of bones breaking inside the casket grew louder and louder, as if the body were being dismantled from within to make room for something rising from the depths of hell. The confession ended with a piercing scream that shattered all the chapel's light bulbs and threw the airs against the wooden walls, leaving an absolute and deadly silence in the room. When the sun began to rise over the mountains, I was the only one left to close the casket. Mr. Arlindo's body was now in an advanced state of decomposition, as if months had passed underground instead of just a few hours. The skin was blackened, the teeth had fallen out, and the clothes were torn by claws that did not belong to him. The family members fled the town before noon, abandoning the lands and mansions that were now marked by the curse of that nightly confession. The St. Anthony Cemetery was never the same. The graves around Mr. Arlindo's plot began to sink inexplicably, and flowers never grew in that wing again. I resigned and moved to the coast, trying to bury those memories under the sound of the waves, but the silence of the night still brings back that guttural whisper. The chapel was demolished in 1995 after a series of poltergeist events that haunted the faithful, but the workers who labored on the site swear they found small human bones embedded in the foundation, exactly where the dead man said they would be. The village of 1991 became a ghost town, a place where the past refuses to be forgotten and where the soil still holds the bitter taste of the blood of those who tried to buy eternity with the lives of others. And what if I told you that? Perhaps the wake you recently attended wasn't as silent as it seemed? Sometimes, the dead man isn't resting, he's just waiting for the moment the last witness leaves the room to start talking to the walls. Evil isn't erased by death, it transforms, takes root in the place where the crime was committed, and waits for a curious ear to spread its seed of horror. If you hear a snap coming from a casket or notice that the candle flames are behaving strangely near a body, do not go near to investigate. Some confessions are made for the shadows, and if you hear them, you will belong to them for the rest of your days. What the gravedigger heard in 1991 was just the beginning of a cycle that repeats in every forgotten parish and in every cemetery where the silence is too deep to be natural. The earth may accept the body, but it never accepts the lie, and sooner or later, it forces the dead to rise and scream the truth to whoever is unfortunate enough to be nearby. The next wake you visit might be the setting for a revelation you would rather have never heard, for once the dead man confesses, he never stops whispering in your ear.